So today I'm going to begin detailing out how I integrated ChatGPT with Unity, and first we're going to start working on setting up our Python environment, then we will begin creating the ChatGPT web service, and lastly we're going to be testing the API by using a VS Code REST client, which is going to be very helpful for this video series. So let's jump into my computer and start working on it. Python-m and then venv, which is very similar in macOS as well, so just make sure that you find the right commands. So what I'm going to do, this is going to be the name of the Python environment. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to install the environment using the Python version that I currently have installed, which I believe is 3.8 or 3.9. And you can check that by just basically typing in Python, and you're going to see that I do have 3.8.10. So you can do anything greater or equal to 3.7. It's going to work with this video. So let me just go ahead and get out of that. Now what I need to do is, because I'm using Windows, I'm going to activate my Python environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my directory here, and then I'll access scripts and then activate. And if you want to use CMD, you can do CMD. If you're using PowerShell, which in my case is what I'm using, I'm going to do PS1. And then there's also going to be the actual command for Linux, which I'll put all those commands in the description so you guys see how to do it. And as soon as you do that, you're going to see that now we have this green, basically the name of the environment on the left, and that designates that we have a virtual environment activated. So I'm going to go ahead and copy here a command that we're going to need to run. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste that. And we're going to be using the ChatGPT Wrapper. And what that is basically just a Python wrapper that somebody else wrote that basically runs a headless browser, which means that it doesn't need to run the browser as we're running this. It basically runs behind the scenes by communicating with a browser. So once you install it, you're going to see that we have it installed already. You're going to see some of the things that got installed is Playwright, which allows you to use a headless browser, which is what we're going to be using. Greenlit, and then different dependencies that we're going to need, including the the ChatGPT component that we are installing. So the next thing that I want you to do though is if you go also to the description, you're gonna find these requirements.txt, and I'm gonna link it so you guys have it. And all we need to do is basically gonna install all these dependencies. So what I'll do to do that is we're gonna do pip install and then -r. And right now we are in this level, so we need to go back one level. Well, actually I have it on the same directory. So if you have it in a different directory, you can just go into that. But basically it's going to be the path of that file that is going to contain all the dependencies that we're going to be using today. There we go. So we should have everything that we need as far as like to run ChatGPT. So now if you do ChatGPT and you hit install, what this is going to do, it's going to configure ChatGPT, the actual wrapper, the Python component, to be able to talk to a browser. So in my case, I am using Firefox, which this is going to allow you to, it'll install it by default when you do ChatGPT install. And you can see that as soon as I did that, it already opened a session. If you don't see this at the beginning, you might see basically a username and password that you need to enter. Just make sure that you do that because it's going to, it's going to authenticate and save the credentials so that you can communicate with ChatGPT from within this plugin, this component. So we can test it really easy here and say, create a mono behavior, and then that displays hello world. And you can see, let's see if it knows that we're talking about Unity. Normally I tell it, there we go. It does know that it is Unity, which is pretty cool. So we know that this is working by just, actually adding a prompt and asking it to do something. In this case, it just has text. We didn't tell it to log it to the debug, but I think this, this works. So once it's done, once you can communicate with it, you can just go ahead and close out of that. And you're gonna see here that it says provide a prompt for ChatGPT. So we can say, can you calculate 2 plus, this is very simple. And you might get an error the first time, and that's because the first time that you run it, you need to just close it and run it again. And we can tell it to do something more complicated. We can say create a behavior in Unity that displays hello world to the debug log, and then hit enter. And if everything is working, if you install it successfully, it's not going to launch anything because Playwright, it basically runs in the background. And it's going to authenticate, it's going to saying the prompt, and the prompt response should be coming back. And you guys can see that ChatGPT says, here's the example of a model behavior in Unity, and basically has our code, which we can copy and paste into Unity, which is really cool. And it tells you here what you need to do. We know what we need to do if you're using Unity for a while. So now we can just go ahead and close out of this. We can just do Control-Z in Windows to close out. And we know that that part of the code is currently working. So now what we need to do is I want to create a service, right? A service that basically is an API that we can call from within Unity. And to do that, I'm going to be using Flask, and that's the reason why I had you install that. So I already have a file in here, and you can call this anything you like, but I call it ChatGPT_service py. Just make sure that you put it under a folder. In my case, I did service. And once you do that, we're going to be creating the actual service. So if you don't know Python, you can just copy and paste or follow along what I'm doing. I'll be making this available in the near future. I might not make it available right now to GitHub until I get it all done, but you can just basically follow along and then get it all set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to access our wrapper, and then I'm going to go ahead and import and then ChatGPT. This is going to be the chat wrapper, the wrapper that we install as one of the dependencies. So we just basically bringing that package into Python here. And then I'm also going to be using Flask, and then I'll just import Flask here. And then I'm also going to be importing requests. And then I also need to import the JSONify, and this is going to allow us to basically be able to handle JSON code into the Flask service that we're building. So, and the reason for that, let me just explain that a little bit, is because we're going to be sending JSON data from Unity to this service, and then this service is going to basically decode and deserialize the JSON and convert it into an object. Okay, so now what we need to do here is I'm going to say Flask, and we can just say name. So this is just basically how you initialize Flask. And then I'm also going to be creating an instance of ChatGPT. So you say ChatGPT equal ChatGPT, and then we just do our parenthesis here. Just make sure you do the capital letter there. So now what we need to do is we need to do a couple of routes. So I'm going to do just a simple route to start. So just do this route is just going to be, just make sure that we can communicate to the service. And the endpoint, I'm going to put it under /ChatGPT, and then a status. I normally do this when I'm dealing with services. I always add a status endpoint just to make sure that it is running. And then you can specify what kind of method we're going to be allowing. So in this case, this is just going to be a get. And then I'll just define the actual method here. Just make sure that I do a status and then colon. And then we're going to be returning JSON. So I'm just going to say JSONify. I think that's how you say it. And if not, just make sure that you correct me in the comments. But anyway, so you can just do OK. And what this is going to do is just going to return this JSON to the browser. So now what I need to do here is I need to also execute this. So what I need to do is I'm going to say if name, and then equal, and I'm going to say, make sure that this equal main. So I'm just going to say main, equal, and then column. And we're going to say that app.run, and we're going to be running basically this Flask application. And I'm going to say threaded equal false, because right now, even though we're building an API, the ChatGPT team does not provide an API for us. So I want to make sure that a call is executed and then return. If you do it threaded, we're going to be doing multiple calls. And right now, the API for ChatGPT is not available. Once they make it available, we can you basically just remove that parameter and then have this service be some sort of a gateway that we can access. So once you do that, we need to create another endpoint, but I want to run it just to make sure that this is working. And if you want to run it, all you need to do is just Python, and then we can just give it the name of the file. In our case, it's going to be ChatGPT service. And if everything works, we should see these. And technically, you could open up a browser window and go to that, and then make sure that you go to that endpoint. So we're going to do that. Let's go ahead and right-click in here, open up a browser window, and then I'll just go ahead and execute that. And we can just do that. And then remember, it's ChatGPT status. And we did get the message, OK, so that means our service is currently working. OK, so now let's do the real thing. Now we know that the Python service is working, and I'm going to be lazy here, and I'm going to copy and paste this. This one is going to be a little bit different because we're going to be asking a question. So the question here is going to be a post. And normally when you're taking in data, you want to do a post. In this case, we're getting data, we're getting the JSON. This one we're posting to ChatGPT, so we're going to be creating a post. And we're also going to be passing information in the body of this post, so just make sure that you do that. Then this one is going to be a different method, so it's going to call it question. I'm also going to be getting the args. So to get the args from the request, we can just say request, and then you can say args. Then I'm also going to be getting some data from this. So I'll just say request.json. So we're basically just getting an object from the request JSON file that we receive from Unity or from anybody that is calling into the service. And then I'm just going to say, you know what? I have a prompt object now. Can you give me the property that, that is named question? Basically give me the value of that property. So that's what we're doing here. And then what I need to do is just for sanity checks, let's just go ahead and make sure that we're getting some information that we're going to need basically for debugging purposes. So I'm just going to say, make sure that if we are in debug, and we can just say comma, default, it's going to be equal to false. And then I'll just show you, I'll just explain this in just a minute so you guys know what this is doing. So what I'm doing in here is from Unity, I want to be able to pass in a debug flag. And if I have the debug flag, I want to display in here the code that I'm getting from ChatGPT. This is really cool because we want to see what we're getting from ChatGPT, right? So just make sure that you do that. And then what we can do here is we can say, you know what, ChatGPT, can you give us question received? Basically, this is saying, I did receive your questions, so we're gonna be processing that. And then in here, I also want to display the question that I am getting from Unity or from the caller. So we can just say, you know what, show me the question that you are sending me. And then I'm just going to say format. And in this case, I'm just going to be displaying the question. So far, we're not really, displaying the information that we're getting from ChatGPT. We're just displaying the information that we're getting into this service. So I can just copy and paste this. And then what I'll do here is I'm just going to say response ChatGPT. In this case, we're going to be asking the component here, the ChatGPT wrapper, can you ask the question that the caller is asking, so we can just pass it in. So this is actually what's going to do most of the work. And then we can just copy and paste this one more time. And in this case, I want to say, response was received. And then technically, we could just copy and paste that. And then we can just display the response here. We don't need to do all that. And I'm just going to do display response. And then lastly, we're just going to be returning the response back into the caller. So the next thing that I want to do, though, is in this file, I have this HTTP call example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in a new tab. In fact, we can just put it right here. So we have our service in here. And in fact, we can just probably just make this a little smaller so we can see the whole thing. We don't need a breakpoint in there. So I'll just make this smaller. So service here, couple of calls in here. And the thing that I'm going to have you do, though, is go ahead and download this extension. And you're going to search for REST client and make sure that you download this REST client. We can use Postman or we can use curl. I like to use this. It was actually pretty cool because you can set up a post like this. This is the IP address, the endpoint, the HTTP version, also the content that we're going to be sending, and then the object that we're going to be sending. So I have an example here for a post. I also have another example for a post with a different question. And then lastly, I'm just calling into the status endpoint. So we make some changes in our code here. So we need to go ahead and kill this from running and then just basically do Python ChatGPT_service. And I want to make sure that there's no errors. So there's no errors that it's showing. I can select this and then do Control-Shift-P. And then we can just send, I think we can just send REST client, send request, or you can just do Control-Alt-R and basically to send it. We did get the status okay, so that's good. Our API is, it's getting called. You can also see we got a 200 right here. So let's ask a question here. This one says, create a C# script which displays hello world. So I'm going to go ahead and select all these, and I'm going to do Control-Shift-P, and I'm just going to click on this send HTTP request. And when this is running, you're going to see that it says waiting in here, and that means that it is actually doing the call. It hasn't gotten a response just yet. So right now it's in this line, and it's saying, okay, you know what? I want to ask the question, and we're just basically waiting for the wrapper to get a response back. All right, guys, so it looks like this completed. It took a little bit of time, but we got the answer. You can see that the response here includes the explanation. It says, here's a basic C# script that displays the text hello world. And we also get our coding here in Markdown, which includes the actual hello world. And this is funny because this looks like a command, a console application instead of a Unity application, but it gives you, the information that you requested. Let's say that we wanted to make it look more like a Unity script. So you can say create a Unity C# script which displays hello world, and then just select send request. And you can see now we're waiting, so we can wait for that new answer. Okay, so it looks like that completed, and this looks a lot better, right? Now we can see Unity Engine, we can see this is inheriting from mono behavior, and we also see a star and debug.log hello world, which is great. And this also tells you here what you need to do to make it work. It says to attach this to a game object. So far so good. So let's try a different call. This one says create a C# script which creates a cube and do not include any explanation. So we can say create a Unity C# script that creates a cube, something like that. And we can add more complicated stuff if we wanted to. So I'm gonna do that and then just send that other request. And looks like this is completed as well. We can see, this was successful call, C#, Unity Engine, and we don't have any explanations, which is really cool because sometimes, well, in the future, we wouldn't want to see explanations because we're gonna get the data in Unity and execute it. So you can see Unity Engine, this create cube inherits from mono behavior. We have our star method, which is very common. And we're also creating a cube and creating a primitive, which also uses primitive.cube, which works great. Obviously, if you wanted to do something more complicated, you can. So we can try something more complicated in here. We can say create a Unity snake game and provide all the scripts required to do so. Something like that. It doesn't need to be exact. We can see what we get back. We're just gonna do and send the request. All right, so we got our answer here. So creating a snake game in Unity will require several scripts to handle different aspects of the game, such as snake movement, spotting food, detection of collision. So it has everything in here that you would need to do that. Looks like it doesn't have the scripts necessary to do that, but it tells you what you would need to do to basically implement something like that. But we know that this is working. So let's say that you wanted to display the actual questions that is getting asked. So just make sure you include debug equal true. And this is gonna be really powerful when we're starting to use this for something like in Unity. That way we can see the questions that are getting sent to the service. So we can just call this one, and then we can actually click in here to send the request. And we got a 400. Let me try that again. And it's gonna go ahead and send it. And now you can see the question received is displayed, which is basically this line right here. We can see ChatGPT question received. I can also see the questions that are getting asked, but you can see now we're getting the answer as well because the bug is set to true. And you can see here the response was received, and we got the script that we requested, and we can also see the explanation of how to use that script in Unity. So that's honestly everything that I wanted to show you guys today. I'm going to be doing the actual ChatGPT service client for Unity on the next video, where we're going to be able to basically display this information in Unity, and then we'll keep working on more cool videos and hopefully get to the final version of this prototype, which is what you guys probably saw on Twitter or you saw on the initial video that I did on ChatGPT. So really excited about this video series. If you want to learn anything more about what I'm doing with ChatGPT, let me know in the comments. And also, if you're enjoying these videos, also let me know. I really want to hear from you. Thank you very much, guys.